What? Whoa! Oh, that's so sad. Hold on. I'm Dan, and I've been designing kitchen products for 38 years. I'm going to test these 7 kitchen gadgets and see if I can find a way to make them better. Notice that the pinky is doing the most stretch. Ease that curve. Round those edges. Come around with a wing like that. These are the gadgets I'm going to test. The watermelon windmill, slap chop, clever cutter, pineapple slicer, apple peeler, strawberry huller, and the corn kernel stripper. Now, here's the fun part. Pineapple slicer. The purpose of this device is to both core and slice the pineapple in one continuous motion. We have a couple of pineapples here. We're going to put it through its paces. Okay, I'm going to take this pineapple off with its head. I am ready to test how effective this device is. So, it is finding its way down. Once it catches the pineapple, it feeds itself down. So it really is a simple screw mechanism. I feel like I'm done and pull it out, and I've got a cored pineapple and a spiralized pineapple. It takes a little bit of effort to do that. It's off. And now I've got pineapple slices spiralized on the table. And you now have a great container for pina coladas. So I'm now going to slice the pineapple and skin it using a knife, and we'll see how long that takes and how it compares. In terms of effectiveness, I would rate this a 5. It was very effective at producing a pretty good-looking cylinder of pineapple slices. Let's now try the left-handed oil test. If you're in the kitchen, you're going to have wet hands or oily hands or slippery hands, and even if you dry them or grab a towel, sometimes it just doesn't work. I am right-handed. I'm going to try using this with my left hand, but making it as slippery as possible. This is a technique that I use when designing almost anything that's going to be handheld. And by challenging myself like that, it'll really point out some design flaws. And I do feel like the handle is just a little bit slippery going this way. Why? Because it's this bulbous shape, and because my hand is so slippery, it's kind of like spinning a bar of soap. Okay, we're coming out. I am now struggling to squeeze, maybe because I'm using my left hand. I just can't get my fingers in there. Okay, I did it, but that hurt. I would give this a 4 for ease of use. There's not a whole lot of pressure involved in doing this. It does feed itself down, but just bear in mind, worst case scenario, you may want to put a towel on top of this. It's something that's going to stabilize your hands a little more if you have any dexterity problems or if your hand is even a little bit slippery. When you design items for the kitchen, you need to design for the whole family. And using fingertips when you have arthritis is difficult. There are as many younger people as older people who have arthritis when you look at the actual demographics. The change here would be very simple. It would just be tapering these buttons so that you don't need as much push. You can see that these buttons are tapered in this direction a little bit. I would have gone in quite a bit more and still allow this to push, or to design this so that the button is shaped this way with just a little bit of a flat here to catch the steel. Because then if you push that way, you don't have to push your fingers into the hole, but you'd still be able to release this and slide it out of the tube. The other thing I would suggest is that this handle is fine, but you only twist this clockwise. It has no reason to go back. So just from a visual cue, I would have designed this to look a little more like it was shaped to twist in the clockwise direction. And the reason is, now I am pushing against a curve and pulling against a curve. I think I would buy this. I like it. Using a 5-point scale, 5 would be something that I buy for myself because I want to own it. 4 would be something that I buy for someone else. I would give this a 4.5. It is pretty nice, and it does have some satisfaction quality to it in eviscerating that pineapple. Corn stripper. Now I am going to strip some corn. To load the corn, we place it on the bottom teeth there that are going to grab. I'm then going to take this piece, which is going to center the corn, Put the corn stripper on top. Okay, it's taking a bit of force to do this, and I'm not sure what my results are looking like. Things are starting to go a little crooked. It's taking a lot of work. I keep going down. Okay, I made it down. So that took quite a bit of weight to do it. Let's see what the results are. And it's, okay, it didn't get everything. There's some corn kernels here, corn kernels here. So, not great. In terms of effectiveness, I rate this corn stripper a 1, ineffective. And start to push. Whoa! Oh, that's so sad. Hold on. Well, luckily there was nothing else on the counter that's breakable. I'm going to have to try the two-handed technique. Get some body weight into this. No, that is an unreasonable amount of force. I'm going to do some banging here. Okay, corn cob is out. I'm missing a pretty good section of corn. The results are fine, but the effort was excessive. In terms of ease of use, I give the corn stripper a 1. If you have a bundt pan at home and you want to make some corn, I would say pull out the bundt pan. My buy rating, I would give this a 1. I wouldn't even buy it for someone I don't like. This is the watermelon windmill. This gadget is designed to cube a watermelon. Let's test it out. You don't want to put a lot of pressure on a knife ever, especially something round like this, which can be a little bit out of control. So rocking it is a bit safer way to cut something like this. Okay, so I am ready to start windmilling my watermelon. Push forward, and what you get are some cubes. Actually, pretty good looking cubes. Let's keep going to see how quickly I can decimate this watermelon. The first pass, this is not a problem, but as you get down into the watermelon, these fins are actually preventing you from getting all the way to the end of the watermelon. If you're like me, I would want to eat that, and I do want to eat that. So for effectiveness, I would give this a 3. I'm going right down the middle because I thought it was pretty easy to get through a good portion of this watermelon. But I am a little disappointed that I'm running up against the wall and I'm not being able to get as much out of this watermelon as I wished. So let's get nice and slimy. Not too bad, but I'm not easy, right? So that was a little awkward. What's happening is I really don't have an ability to push with my left hand since I oiled it up. This should be the case not only if your hands were slippery, but also if you had any form of dexterity problems. It just makes this tool a little bit harder to use. Ease of use, there wasn't a whole lot of effort required to do that, so I would give that a 4. I would have designed this with some contour. At least make it flare out a little bit, so that you're able to push against something. They could have done that with the same piece of green plastic, so they could have done that without adding a part. As you get deeper into the watermelon, the windmill, the fins are stopping you from going all the way to the edge. I think it's just inherent in the fact that this is designed to make cubes. Watermelons are designed to be round. The solution, I would say, is to go to Japan where they create square watermelons. The advantage of the windmill for the watermelon is that there is a bit of playfulness to it and a little bit of novelty that using a knife doesn't. But as I started getting down into the watermelon, I was starting to see some faults, which was unfortunate. So I would give a buy rating for this a number 1. I don't think I would personally buy this. Clever cutter. It is designed to cut. I think I'll start with zucchini. I will say with zucchini, it cuts pretty smoothly. Let's try a potato. Because the potato is fatter, you're using a blade that's further from the pivot point, means you have less leverage. It should be a little bit harder. But since it's a potato, it's pretty soft. it is still possible to cut this without a whole lot of effort. And let's see what it does on the tomato. Okay, I don't know if you caught that, but if I start a little bit of cut on the tomato, we're now into the tomato, and it seems to be cutting okay. Maybe not that very last part, which wants to be chopped. It's working better than I anticipated. I think, as seen on TV very often, drives me away more than it pulls me forward. But it did cut with less effort than I expected. In terms of effectiveness, I would put it up there at a 4. I will say off the bat, it does feel pretty stable. I don't feel like it's out of control using my left hand. And let's try cutting some things. It seems to cut pretty well. The shape of the handle is catching my hands. I'm not relying on any pull or friction or sliding friction to use this. In terms of ease of use, I would rate this a 4. Whenever you squeeze anything, your thumb is opposing 4 fingers, and those 4 fingers are supplying a lot of the power. Even though your pinky little finger may be weaker, it is furthest from the pivot point, so your pinky actually has the most leverage. If I was going to squeeze this with my finger here, choke up on it, I'm very close to the pivot point, and it's not that easy to do. If I want to get some leverage on it, I would come back here with my fingers, and it feels much lighter to squeeze. The way this handle is shaped, it actually requires your pinky to stretch further, and it almost guarantees that your pinky is going to be, with a smaller hand anyway, that your pinky is going to be reduced to using its fingertip, not the middle segment of the pinky. What I would have done, or at least experimented with, is a curve that went the complete opposite way to make sure that the pinky comes into play. That would have been a simple change, and I think that would have been the case if the design team who designed this was, 1, thinking, or 2, looking at people who may have smaller hands. Okay, my buy rating for the Clever Cutter is 5. I would like to have this around the kitchen. Slap chop. These choppers are not new inventions. I remember my mother having one when I was a kid. There was always one in the kitchen, and it was kind of a fun thing to do, to chop things or say, hey, let me try that. So I'm going to start with a couple of herbs here. Now what happens as the chopper blades come down is they rotate a little bit, just enough to keep chopping in different places. So let me try this 10 or 12 times. And let's see how we did. I would say basil-wise, not that great. I still have a lot of intact pieces. It's not what I expected. So let me take a look here if I can see any gaps between the blades and the table, and I can see gaps. There is light coming through. Okay, we're gonna try next with some celery, and I'll just break off 1 or 2 stalks here. And we're gonna mix in some carrots as well. Okay, let's go. So it's chopping. In the beginning, it started sticking a little bit. And let's stop there because I think we're getting pretty fine with the carrots and celery. So that was not too bad. Let's push these aside and try a tomato. And what we got is pretty finely chopped tomato. So that is looking pretty good. Although it didn't get the skin, which is kind of too bad. So maybe I'm not done yet. Let's try this again. That's better. So the same, not really good though. We still have skin left. So the same problem we have with the herbs we have with the tomato skin is it wants to stay intact. In terms of effectiveness, I'll give the slap chop a 3. The reason is it does carrot, celery, things like that, things that want to be chopped like that, it does them really well and does them very quickly. It's effective in some cases. Well, first of all, picking this up was a little tricky, even with my right hands, right? So I am Picking up a cone, which is not that easy to do. Of course, I could pick it up from here. Let's shove some bits under there. Slapping like this, I wouldn't expect this to be any difference because I'm just coming down hard. I'm not really grabbing, or it's not dependent at all on any form of friction. Since I'm just pressing down, that wasn't much different than using my right hand. I know spinning this to open it is going to be totally an impossible task. You're going to want to get a towel or something, maybe to get a little more friction on this. In terms of ease of use, I would want to take the entire experience into consideration, including the fact that at the end of the process, you're going to want to open this and rinse it out. And that was just unfortunately difficult. So I would knock this down to a 3. The fact that the blades don't hit the bottom is kind of curious. And that problem could be solved by just making sure that those blades are flexible enough, or at least the connection of those blades is flexible enough. So even if one corner of the blade hits first, the rest of it will flatten out. This could have had some shape to it, something other than being round. At least you'd have some pressure to push against. Certainly just do something a little more typical, a stand-in, and put in some serrations or something that would add some friction to it. One other thing I would consider is the shape of this top circle. It's a little sharp. It's a little tight when you put your hand on top of it. I would have turned this more into a mushroom shape. So ease that curve so that you have a bit of a flatter surface so that the pressure is distributed more evenly across that surface when your palm comes down on it. So for a buy rating, I would give this a 2. I would buy this for someone that I don't particularly like if it was on sale. Apple peeler, corer, slicer. It's got a couple of parts here that look like directly out of Game of Thrones. Look at this medieval apple piercer. Let's see if we can just get it to go. We may have to pull this back and start the peeling process. Whoa, there goes my spring. That wasn't too bad, but did I get the core of the apple? No, I kind of missed. Now, depending on the apple, your spiral may or may not hold together. Granny Smith is holding together pretty well. It is possible to pull this back, clamp it, so you can core without peeling. You can also do the opposite. You can put this up, you can swing this back, and you can peel without coring. In terms of effectiveness, I would give this 5 out of 5. 5 stars for this. So, time to oil up my left hand and see what I can do. Here we go. It's on its way. Are we slicing? So what I've done now is I had my blade pulled away, but I just spiraled the apple for people who like the skin. Skin is good for you. It was not difficult to do with my left hand. The shape of this is contoured in a way that my hand wouldn't slip. You do need to line things up. You do need to be careful when you're cleaning it because parts can get lost. So in terms of ease of use, I would give this a 3. You'll notice that this cross section forms an upside down T, and there are quite a number of crevices here that would be difficult to clean. So I would take this cross section of a T, which now looks like this. I would round those edges so that it's a bit easier to get a cloth or a rag or a brush in there and clean out anything that may find itself trapped in here. I gotta say, some of these small parts are kind of difficult to deal with in the kitchen. I mean, you really don't want small parts like this that can fall down the drain. You could put more of a molded knob on here, which actually may be a little bit easier to control. I think that would be less likely to be lost. And I think it would just all around be a little bit nicer. For a buy rating, I would give this a 3 because I think this would make a perfect Secret Santa gift. Strawberry Huller. Let me start with what could be a relatively small one in our pile. And I'm just going to pull up the leaves a little bit so I catch them all. Press open the prongs. Push in a little bit. twist, pull out. Okay, I left a couple leaves here, but they're actually loose. And that did pretty well. I'm going to try something a little different with the strawberry huller. It was not designed to be used with a tomato, but we have some tomatoes here, and I'm going to give it a go. Open it wide because it's a tomato, not a strawberry. I'm going to give it a little spin. Give it a little more spin. Oh, that wasn't too bad. So again, this is not designed for tomatoes, but certainly can be used for tomatoes. If you're going to design something as odd as a strawberry huller, it needs to work great. You don't want to design one of these or buy one of these and have them kind of work. So I think this is effective on strawberries. I would give it a 5, extremely effective. Let's try the left-handed oil test on this one. This is a little less stable in my left hand, especially when slippery. Staying in place, it's not terrible, but I do feel a difference. In terms of results, that turned out fine. In terms of ease of use, I give this a 4. It's pretty easy. Thing I would advise is look at this part of the flange and either widen it or give it a bit of an undercut or do both, because that would stabilize the finger under that flange. What you would do is you come around like that with a wing, really make that flange catch the finger. I would check to see if this green part would want to be a little bit taller, because as you get into tight pinches, that's also difficult with someone with arthritis. Don't want to get too big that this is just out of control. It's a very odd looking object, but I think coming up a little bit higher could help people. And that's about it. I would give this a buy rating of 5. Not only for myself, but this would be a cute little present to give people. So I'm all for it. Virtually everything you see and touch throughout the day is a design decision made by someone. It's very often that someone is a male. Sometimes they're not as conscious of who they should be designing for as they could be. Companies would come to me and they would describe to me their average consumer or their average user. And I would say, that's fine, but I don't care about the average person. I need to know the people who are weakest and strongest. I need to know the tallest and shortest. I need to understand the spectrum. And sometimes that's not in the mindset of people who are designing things. I think that explains why so many products may not be designed as optimally as possible. I still look through the kitchen today and I see opportunities to do something unique and different and to surprise people. So from a design point of view, it's not rocket science. It's not life and death. They're just kind of fun things to design and fun things to design cleverly.